All right, everyone, we start off today talking about Hillary Clinton again, actually. She said something that's pertinent. She said something that's, well, it's true. I know it's broken clock mode, but she's actually right here. Link in the description, archived, of course, talking about, specifically the transgender debate, but more largely Idpol. The insinuation is the Idpol side of the far left, the cringe fringe, effectively. They have these so-called activistic causes that in some cases only a small proportion of the population really gives a damn about, and they're trying to ram it down the throat of the Democratic Party to use that as a political cudgel against their ideological foes. And Clinton's pointing out that it looks like the Democrats in some cases are trying to lose elections by focusing on these things instead of broader issues. I would, by the way, caution Republicans that they are hazarded in doing the same thing right now. We see the Texas GOP effectively attempting to purge the log cabin Republicans, putting, gay and lesbian people back out as a front burner moral issue. Well, what works in Texas isn't going to work on a national party level. And the problem is we have a post-national style internet communication system in the world now. So what is generally local or state level or regional or something is extrapolated automatically to be at least a national, if not a global issue whenever something like that happens. And it's basically the same problem the Democrats have, but we'll get to them first. I would also point out, I was correct in my surmisings the other day. A bunch of legacy wonks and pundits are endlessly replicating what Clinton said the other day, which was first reported actually by Fox in the mainstream media, with regards to not running in 2024. The nuance of the context of her statement has completely been lost, and now people are saying, oh, Hillary is ruled out a run in 2024. Uncle Sticks, though, will tell you the truth. She has not ruled it out. In the context of her statement, it is only a pertinent statement at all if Biden does run. If he stays in, she stays out. That's obvious. He's the incumbent, even if he's doomed to lose if he runs, and I think that he would be. Especially before midterms, she's not made actually any final binding decision. I still speculate Biden is unlikely to be the nominee. Hell, he could drop dead at any time. He's having more and more falls, more and more spills because his bike is so problematic, the same bike that he's been using for 15 years. All of a sudden it seized up and is a real big problem. The Secret Service does not do any extra maintenance on the bike that the President of the fucking United States rides. Anyway, I did want to point out one little interesting tidbit here. Again, the legacy media won't report on this particular part of what Clinton's saying. Specifically, she's talking about transgendered people, and she's saying, well, what sense does it make to call J.K. Rowling a fascist? We need to get past these progressive, so-called progressive issues and focus on things that matter. Now, I mean, generally speaking, I agree with that wisdom, if you can call anything from Hillary Clinton wise. Again, you almost have to admire the grift because the Clintons are so good at it and getting away with it. The problem is, what mainline issue right now specifically can any, certainly Biden insider, Democrat run on? It can't be the economy. It can't be crime or the border or anything like that. Can't be the COVID response. That's no longer really a mainline issue. That's been backburnered too. What issue are you going to run on? Well, clearly, fear of Republicans. Well, Mitch McConnell mentioned Social Security the other day. By God, we've got to vote blue. The strategy may actually work. Again, there are still months for the Republicans to fuck themselves in the ass prior to midterms. I think it'd take a lot of ass fucking in order for them to lose and not regain the House, where they only need to grab up 7 seats anyway, and they're favored to grab up more than that, even if they lose all of the toss-up races. But again, the Republicans are good at that. We'll wait and see. It could be a really, really funky midterms this year, and everyone will be crying about how there was fraud regardless of who wins, so it doesn't really matter at the end of the day. But here's an interesting point. And you won't hear this nuance brought up probably by anybody else in the entirety of commentary, including some very good independent commentators. I just happen to have a little bit of a different mind than most people, and I like to look into these things from a rather convoluted and perhaps insane perspective sometimes. Clinton is ignoring her own role, and her liberal friends' role, in creating the problem. She's dumping on the far left, which is good. The far left should be shooed into the dustbin of history where they belong. But you, Madam Hillary, and people like you, Biden certainly comes to mind, he's been in politics since the 70s, you caused the problem. If the Democrats are reaping the rewards of their ill-fated harvest in terms of a bunch of Marxists that won't work with them and keep forcing them to address issues like transgendered people, in which bathroom they use, which Trump literally, sideswiped them on years ago. You'll remember that with Jenner and, hey, come to Trump Tower. You can use whatever bathroom you want. I don't give a shit. It's very, very funny. The Democrats have almost lost this, by the way, as an issue. It's true. The Democrats are getting heaped with abuse because they have this left-wing core in their party. But you caused it to happen. They didn't, in a vacuum, they didn't all of a sudden usurp a chunk of your party and AOC and Ilhan Omar and idiots like them get elected. You caused it to happen. You allowed Bernie to caucus with your party for years and years without even registering as a Democrat, and you had no problem with that, despite the fact that he represents literal socialism, self-avowed. He's sitting there praising Castro and shit. And other Democrats, eventually, they understood the basic premise here, which is what the Justice Dems have done. They realized that a bunch of your boring friends who hadn't had to run a significant campaign in 20 years in areas that were becoming more and more blue, that is more and more left-wing, were vulnerable. And they said, look, we can literally take over half a dozen House seats right now. All we have to do is primary these fools and get them out, and we get a safe win. We can put in whoever we want. They can be brain dead, like Ilhan Omar, Rashida Tlaib, AOC, the rest of the geek squad in the House. There's 7 of them now. And this was caused not by left-wing provocateurs, not by craptivism and pink-haired, the pink-haired freaks. You think that they're capable of figuring out how to run a primary? They don't even know how to file the paperwork with regards to election law. They were helped by a bunch of rich people who want control of the political system. They want their slice of the pie. The Justice Dems claim to be craptivism. They're not really. It's just a money-making endeavor. Now they have a bunch of people in the House and arguably at some point in the Senate to their name. You caused this. You allowed them to register as Democrats with no apparent oversight, despite the fact that they are widely at variance with the party's central premise, with the platforms that you and other liberals actually have. Hillary Clinton is a missing link candidate. She's not just a standard JFK liberal anyway. She's already a leftoid. On economics, yes, the Clintons represent something further to the left than what you would conceive of as proper centrism, certainly. Certainly the proper economics in general. But the Idpol component that you yourself basically have tried to begin to avoid was injected into the party by people that you sat by and made your friends and had no problem with them. And it's been a problem for decades. Here's what led to that situation. That's just a symptom. The real disease, the real cause, is that the Democratic Party always talked a big game about going far left. During the primaries, candidates would usually, and then snap back to the center during the general. And they said, we're going to do this and that and the other thing. We're going to give you more welfare. We're going to give you UBI. We're going to give you universal pre-K. We're going to give you free health care. Well, we're going to tax the shit out of everyone and then give you a bunch of freebies. And the leftoids loved it. Oh, and we absolutely love everyone who's non-binary, and we love minorities, and we love the poor, which is why we're trying to make more of them. And they said, yes, of course I love BLM. Oh, let me take a knee. And then they get elected, and they don't do any of these things. Now, I applaud that because all of these things are stupid. Leftoidism is a cancer on the ass of society. But you promised them that you would, and now you're mad about the fact that they speak up? Well, it's no longer just Bernie Sanders. 7 House Democrats are far leftoids. They are socialists. You have 7 socialists currently in the U.S. House of Representatives, and they're all Democrats. No shit, they want representation. No shit, they have opinions. No shit, they're upset when you place Green New Deal horseshit, $1 trillion of wasteful spending from AOC about cow farts. I think her farts probably contribute more to climate change, considering what a gashead she is. You parsed everything, virtually all of it, out of the infrastructure bill just to get it signed, just to get it passed. by mansion and cinema at the 11th hour. The problem is this. While that is proper negotiations in government, because of course its inclusion would have prevented it from being passed through the House or the Senate probably. Even some House Dems would have balked at it, to tell the truth, because of the price tag involved. Regardless, these people don't understand negotiations. They didn't need to negotiate to get into office. AOC didn't need to negotiate. All she had to do was take up a very, very far left platform and run against a jaded incumbent who hadn't had to run a re-election bid in a while because they kept getting renominated without any struggle, and they're in a far blue district. And you caused that to happen. You allowed it to happen, Miss Hillary. You're the ones that caused it. Yeah, no wonder the Democrats are dysfunctional. At some point, I hope you lose hard enough so that you can force these morons back out of the party. Force them to become independents. Maybe they keep getting reelected. At least your party can wash its hands of them. You don't have to deal with them anymore. You'll make more gains if you expunge the socialists from the party. Yes, Bernie Sanders should be kicked out of the Democratic Party. There shouldn't be a mainline political party that represents such a dead ideology as socialism. There shouldn't be anyone who speaks fondly of Fidel Castro, of all people, in the U.S. government. They shouldn't be there. If they were speaking fondly of a right-wing dictator, I dare say you would agree with the premise. But because they're Democrats, at least on paper, you've had no problem with them. You had no problem with them as long as they were getting kids to vote for you. As soon as they spoke up a little bit more and said, hey, what about all those promises you made? Oh shit, now we've got to do something about it. By the way, do you think that Hillary Clinton, who is old and haggard and not well liked even at this point, I think, by a lot of liberals, don't you think that when you defend J.K. Rowling with your particularly outdated 80s and 90s liberal views, you're going to get called a fascist too, and everything will come full circle, and it'll be goddamn hilarious. That's about all. Peace out.